Each culture has their own tropes and stereotypes surrounding the idea of parenting styles. Some positive, others negative, and a few derogatory. Probably the most famous of those in the Chinese world is that of the Asian tiger mom, an overbearing type of strict parenting that seeks to push the child to great achievements in academics or extracurriculars, like violin or piano or something of the like. In this video, I want to do an introduction to Chinese parenting styles, traits, and dynamics. Obviously, parenting is a big, hairy topic, and its study is full of generalizations. Everyone has parents, and everyone has their own experiences with those parents, and those experiences might not be the same as what I am about to talk about. This is inevitable, but I hope this video illustrates some ideas of Chinese parenting dynamics today. I also want to add that this is not going to be comprehensive. This subject is vast and has many rabbit holes to go down, and we can explore those together in future videos. But first, I want to talk a bit about some of the new videos I have queued up for the Patreon. For those who have not signed up to the early access tier, I want to call out a few of the videos queued up and waiting to be released, but can be watched right now. I have one on Foxconn's moving out of China, and another about the history of the Chinese overseas population in South Africa. That's going to be a long one. So head on over to the Patreon page and take a look. I deeply appreciate anything you'd be able to sign up for. Thanks, and on with the show. Parenting styles have been studied in the West for decades. In the prevailing paradigm, such styles are judged on a spectrum between two axes, responsiveness and demandingness. Responsiveness is about how much warmth the parent shows the child, how much they accept the child's actions and beliefs, so on. Demandingness is about how much the parent seeks to control the child, how much supervision they exercise over them, and their expectations in terms of maturity. Parents that exhibit a certain degree of these two axes are classified as being of different types. For instance, a rejecting, neglectful parent has low responsiveness and low demandingness. An authoritarian parent, on the other hand, has a lot of demandingness but low levels of responsiveness, and so on. That's what happens in the West, and that was a quick primer. But in China, there are large and relevant cultural influences like the ideas of Confucianism. Beyond that, there are substantial economic and cultural influences too that have continued to change the way parents in China rear their children in the modern age. The ideas of Confucianist society and families have added new dynamics that do not quite fit in the Western academic frameworks. For example, Confucianist tenets are more collectivist with more focus on the family, less of an emphasis on the individual. Asian parenting styles are said to focus less on autonomy and more on academic education. They show less outward affection and verbal expressions of love, and of course, there is the accepted usage of physical punishment and harsh discipline. People seem to have been missing something in understanding the way Chinese parents parent. So they dug into the Confucian literature and they came up with the idea of guan, a word that literally means to govern. But with a more positive connotation, it can also mean something like to love and to care for. You love someone and you want to do right by them, so you govern their way forward. It is the tradition of Confucianism that elders need to responsibly teach, discipline, and govern. Per the Chinese tradition, it comes from a place of love, but seen from a Western dynamic, it's authoritarian, controlling, and maybe even a little militaristic. Thus, researchers propose the idea of adding a new axis to the Western paradigm, the idea of training, the style of teaching the child to do well in things like school and adhering to socially acceptable behavior. How much respect the parent gets from their peers is thus tied to how well they do this for their child. Most Chinese kids my age grew up with the trope of the strict father and the kind mother. Traditional family dynamic here draws from the Confucian idea that the father leads the family. He is the master of the house, who maintains order, makes the big decisions, and exercises his authority, but in a reasonable manner. Reasonable. The mother, on the other hand, manages household affairs, follows the father's decisions, and tends to the children's daily well-being and education. That is how the traditional family has been structured, or at least that's what the generalization is. But since the late 70s, you also have had major social and economic trends like the one-child policy and new economic reforms that have changed the way parents rear their children. One recent study found that in recent years, this traditional kind of structure has flipped around a bit, and the traditional paradigm is less common than one might think. Fathers, likely because they are often working and so do not get to see their children often, are less authoritarian. Mothers, on the other hand, perhaps because they need to maintain discipline in the household, are the ones showing more strictness and discipline to their children. Here's one anecdote example. In an interview with one such parenting couple, the mother says, "From Monday to Friday, I will keep him a full schedule that does not involve outdoor activities, but on weekends he can relax, go out to play, and eat whatever he wants with my whole companionship. But he has to be calm and quiet when he is scheduled to study. There's no room for negotiation on study issues. Learning is not playing." The father, on the other hand, says, "Children are usually naughty. If you spank him, he might do what you order him to do, but he suffers psychic trauma. The child will be afraid of his parents and will act differently in front of and behind his parents." That's pretty interesting. And there are yet other factors at play. Which parent ends up exhibiting disciplined parenting also seems to correlate to whether the child is a girl or a boy. Furthermore, the profiles might and have swapped over time as the child transitions through adolescence. And of course, if the parents move to the United States or any other place in the West and live there for at least a decade, their parenting styles and practices begin showing traits of the Western style. There are more examples of these changes taking place in Chinese society. For instance, a study of kindergarten parents in Nanjing found that Chinese mothers placed some importance in academic achievement, but also, increasingly, valued emotional and social development. They disapproved of all the homework that teachers were assigning to their kids, and they spoke strongly about the need to have excellent communicative skills and autonomy. My point is that this parenting stuff changes as cultural contexts change. Our parents did not have the same upbringing as their parents, as with the ones before, and so on. Kids who grew up with the negative associations of the quote-unquote traditional household would in turn work hard to avoid it when they themselves have children years later. Thus, when we read a paper or hear a generalization, we should not presume that it is going to remain as such forever. One thing that I only briefly touched on throughout this short little video is how all of this actually affects the child. Does tiger parenting really perform better? Is it responsible for creating high-performing children? Gosh, that is a tough question to answer. Empirical evidence have generally found that tiger parenting is associated with worse academic performance in Asian Americans. Yet back in China, there are studies with initial results that seemingly imply that academically high-performing children follow the traditional family system, which calls for a stern tiger father. We also, though, must acknowledge the role of factors like the parents' own material wealth and resources. The wealthier the parents are, the more likely that their children are going to do better regardless of parenting style. And there's a lot of literature about that. And then, of course, the final caveat with all of this is that test-taking is not the end-all, be-all. Asian Americans especially are known for experiencing an elevated level of depressive symptoms as they enter adolescence and adulthood. You can be demanding without shaming, you can have high expectations without being unrealistic, and sometimes it's alright to only get an A-. Alright everyone, take care of yourselves out there. These little memes made me laugh. If you like this particular video, I'm probably going to do more of the type in the future. So if you want to see those, like and subscribe. And I'll hear from you soon. Thanks everyone. Take care.